Good morning, and thank you all for coming. I'm Lisa Rechsteiner, and I serve as the Senior Manager of Civil Society for PMI US, the U.S. businesses of Philip Morris International. At PMI US, we believe supporting the military community begins with listening. Over the past 2 years, we've spoken directly with military spouses, caregivers, veterans, and the experts who help them. One thing is clear: service members do not experience military life alone. Their families share in their experience, and its impact can last through active duty to transition periods and long after service ends. This understanding is why today's conversation is critical. To mark Military Caregiver Month, we're proud to support this Inside Sources editorial board discussion, bringing together organizations that help military and veteran families at different stages. Our goal is to give our philanthropic partners a platform to share their knowledge and experience. And I'd like to thank today's panelists, Inside Sources, and the journalists participating. You all help showcase the challenges military and veteran spouses and caregivers face. I now hand things over to Michael at Inside Sources to get us started.
Thank you so much. And thank you again to PMI US for making this possible. I'm here as the managing editor of Inside Sources, but I'm also here for Mattie Jane Futrell. Mattie Jane got married when she was 15 years old to Ray Futrell in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And literally when they got back from their weekend fake honeymoon, he had a letter from Uncle Sam saying, guess what, you're going to fight Nazis. He went to Europe, he pushed Patton's tanks across Europe, came back, and then launched the decades-long fight against alcohol addiction. My grandfather was a lifelong struggle with alcohol. He was in AA, out of AA. Eventually, he beat it. But my grandmother, Mattie Jane Futrell, who had not signed up for any of this, spent 55 years fighting the battle of Ray Futrell, of all the legacy of what his service meant to my mom, her daughter, and to me. And by the way, my grandfather's my favorite people in the whole world. My grandmother died at 96 years old and had an amazing life, but she fought that battle every day. And while my grandfather had some support systems, AA, for example, and veterans, Veterans of Foreign Wars and American Legion, there was no support for Mattie Jane, this girl from rural Oklahoma who did not know what she'd gotten herself into. And that's why I'm so delighted to share with you, our news partners, and those of you who are participating, the stories of these organizations who help the spouses, caregivers, and families who also fight these battles along with our warfighters and veterans. We're going to hear from Bonnie Carroll, president and founder of Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. We're going to hear from Steve Schwab with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. We're going to start with Hannah O'Brien, program director of the Veteran Spouse Network based in Austin, Texas. Go ahead, Hannah.
Thanks for having me. I'm Hannah O'Brien, and a program director for the Veteran Spouse Network. We're actually based out of UT Austin's Institute for Military and Veteran Family Wellness. Our institute is kind of a larger research institute studying needs and programs that support our military and veteran families' wellness, as the name would suggest. But the Veteran Spouse Network is really our programming arm. And we were founded in 2016 really to address the very real needs we were hearing from veteran spouses at that time in the state of Texas. Since then, we have grown nationally to provide our military and veteran families with peer support, evidence-based peer support, education, and training to really support their whole health wellness and make sure they have what they need as they are fighting that journey alongside their service member and veteran. We do that through a whole host of programs, group and one-on-one peer support, workshops, educational seminars, suicide prevention training, a lot of suicide prevention training, as well as podcast stories, anything to uplift the voices of our spouses and families. Peer support's really our bread and butter. So we have peer leaders across the country who are doing this work that we train and support because we really believe that social connection is really critical to fostering that understanding and overall wellness of the family. So our peer leaders are pretty much everything to us. We are also a social work research institute. So we're very grounded in understanding the needs of our population and working with them to develop programs. So we engage them kind of at all stages of program development, implementation, and improvement. And that's really critical to who we are as an organization, making sure that what we're doing actually supports their needs. As we were doing that work, we realized there was still a very critical gap in research on this population. So in 2024, we launched the Military and Veteran Spouse Wellness Survey, which really tackles, as it suggests, wellness across 8 dimensions of wellness. And through that research, we found that spouses are really struggling with emotional and physical wellness and social connection, looking for community and finding community, which, selfishly really supported that. What we're doing is supportive of them. So, and most of what we heard in that, in those results really reinforced what we were hearing in peer support groups and spaces that we were serving them in. So that's the work that we do. I love to tell a personal story to really share impact. I'm here today. You have a face of me. I'm a Marine Corps spouse myself, so I'm going to tell you my story because I really do feel like I don't know that my family would exist if it weren't for this community. I met my husband, I'm a Marine veteran with PTSD, 11 years ago. And I was in social work school at the time. And I really credit that education with being able to persevere through the relationship in the early months because I could understand something bigger is at play here, right? I didn't know exactly what it was. I didn't understand anything about the military community, but I knew that there was something going on. I wanted to understand it. I wanted to understand how to support him. But it was hard. He was not getting treatment. He was really struggling. He wasn't letting me in. I didn't know how to support him, and I did not know how to support myself. And kind of most importantly, my core support system had no idea what I was going through. They could not relate, and therefore they couldn't support me. So I was in school, and I looked to my professors, and I said, hey, where can I go? Where can I go to get some help? Where can I go to meet other partners of veterans? And they said, that doesn't exist. Try Al-Anon. I'm not kidding. That's what they told me. And so fast forward, we're about 2 years into our relationship when I graduate and I get this job at the Veteran Spouse Network, and we're still really struggling. And I start to do this work. I start to get to know our incredible peer leaders, our participants, and realize that in doing this work, they are providing me with the community and the support that I was so desperately looking for and in need of. So I don't say it lightly. I really do wonder and kind of question whether or not I'd be happily married with 2 beautiful children if it weren't for the community that I got from this job and this work. So
that's an amazing story.
That's the testimony.
Well, I've got some follow-up questions for you in a second, but let's
Yeah.
start with Steve Schwab. Everyone knows the Elizabeth Dole name, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. Tell us what you do and how it serves the spouses, families, and caregivers of veterans.
Sure. Well, thanks. I'm Steve Schwab. I'm the CEO of the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. We've been in existence for 14 years, and poetically, I'm following Hannah, who described really, in essence, the population that we focus on. But I want to start by grounding us by what's going on in the world right now. We are at war, an active conflict happening in Iran, and we're rightly concerned about the health and wellness of our service members. But as reports suggest, there's about 400 plus service members who've been injured as a result of their service. And that means there's 400 families back home who've become instant caregivers. They weren't prepared. In most cases, they weren't trained. They didn't anticipate that their loved one would be injured or come back different than they left. And that's the new reality for military and veteran families today. Let me tell you about Liz Wright, who's one of our Dole Caregiver Fellows. We have fellows across all 50 states. These are spouses and siblings and friends and parents who serve as caregivers. Liz cares for her husband, who was injured in Iraq, actually suffered, and Bonnie's been doing a lot of work on this, from burn pit exposure, has real deep respiratory issues. While Liz is raising 3 kids who serve also as primary and secondary caregivers to her dad, she's struggling to care for her husband and to maintain a job and an income and a family support system and a way of life. And that's where we come in as a foundation. This, for 14.5 million military and veteran families across the country, is the American new normal. Service doesn't end when service members come home. They transition into veteran status. And as you heard from Hannah, Many of them are suffering from PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, invisible to most of us, but visible and present in everyday life for American families. And they're struggling economically. Most families can't put food on the table. A third of them are living at or below the poverty line. They're struggling to maintain jobs and balancing the needs of supporting their loved ones while raising their kids. And 5.5 million of these children in these families are serving, as we call them, hidden helpers. These are kids as young as 4, 5, and 6 years old, upwards of 18, 19, 20, 21, who are taking on caregiving responsibilities. Young woman named Gaby, one of the hidden helpers across the country that we support, told us recently that when she wakes up in the morning, she goes to her dad's bedroom to ask him what the weather is like today. And it's not because she wants to know what's going outside. She wants to know what's going on inside his head. So if he says, it's sunny, she's like, oh, this is going to be a good day. This is going to be a good day. I can have my friends over. If he says it's stormy, she knows she's got to spend the day helping her dad get through the day. Gaby is 7 years old. And she's living a life where she's structuring her day around the needs of her father. I don't know about you at 7. When I was 7, I was worried about when the streetlights would come on and I had to be home. Gaby worries about a whole lot more. And this is the normal for kids all across the country. The construct of supporting military families has changed. And when we started our work 14 years ago, it was symptomatic. And now it's systemic and long-term because families from Iraq and Afghanistan who are decades into their care for their loved ones are dealing with lifelong wounds, injuries, and illnesses. And so we're on the forefront of offering economic support. Last year, we made $1.5 million in direct financial grants to families. We supported 1,700 families with resource navigation. We're focused on the most at-risk families inside that wider population. And we're just getting started on the systemic reforms that are necessary to make sure that these families and the systems at VA and DOD and clinical support systems all around the country, wherever you are, your local hospitals who are caring for military families should be ensuring that those families get the unique care and support that they need, be it peer support, as you all do so well, or inclusive medical support as it needs to be for veterans and loved ones. So thank you for having us, and I look forward to the conversation.
And we have many questions for you. And for those of you who are watching on the stream, there's a little chat question box at the bottom of your screen. Please send your questions and we will ask them of our guests. But we now to go to Bonnie Carroll, president and founder of Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, TAPS, in Arlington, Virginia. I have to tell you, Bonnie, you're the person, you're like the ghost of Christmas Future. You're the one I did not want to hear because you think about what tragedy assistance means. And it's daunting. So tell us about the organization and the work you do.
Great. Thanks so much. And this truly is a family. What the three of us do really plays into each other. We support each other. We serve the military community, so it's great to be here together. But back in the early 90s, my husband and 7 other soldiers were killed in an Army plane crash. You know, at that time, I was serving also as a reserve officer, working in the private sector, working with nonprofits that supported difficult circumstances. So at the time of my husband's death, I assumed there was an organization for military families who had suffered a loss, a community to come together to find a way forward, to grieve this unique experience, and found it didn't exist, nor had it ever existed in America. Spent 2 years just trying to find my own way forward, talking to other survivors, talking to the other families who lost loved ones in that tragedy, talking to the Defense Department, the VA, to understand where the gaps were, because the last thing I had energy to do was try to create something. But there were 4 core services that Hannah and Steve have also touched on that were missing for families grieving a loss. And the number one thing was just a peer community. The power of coming together with someone else who understood the depth of that loss, both the public loss of a military member, but also the very private tragedy of the loss of a loved one. You know, grief is one of the most misunderstood things in our society. Grief is the normal human response to the death of a loved one, but we think it has this nice, neat trajectory, that it kind of begins at the death and it ends at the funeral and we're back to work and we're the same person that we were before, but it doesn't work like that. So TAPS #1 creates that community now for hundreds of thousands of families experiencing a loss. We also offer a 24/7 helpline because grief is not 9 to 5. It isn't Monday through Friday. It's Mother's Day or Father's Day. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. So we're present for families around the clock and have been now for 33 years. And then also casework assistance. You know, Steve mentioned the amount of financial support. For many of our families, the government does 3 things very well: render final honors, provide a final resting place, and administer benefits to those who are eligible, which is primarily widow and child. But then for all those grieving the loss, they're really left to their own devices. So TAP steps in, fills those gaps, extends care to everyone grieving a loss, recognizing that parents, siblings, step-parents, others in the family are grieving just as heavily. We started noticing trends over the past 33 years. You know, a lot of people now say, well, the war is over. And Steve, you touched on this, where we are today. Not only are we in this chaotic period, but we are also seeing what 20 years of deployments has done to our military and veteran population. We started seeing 20 years ago unique cancers that MD Anderson and the Mayo Clinic were diagnosing as environmental, not genetic. Glioblastoma, pulmonary issues. And we started really looking into that. What were the commonalities? I was serving on the Defense Health Board at the time, was raising those issues, and it took about 15 years before we really gained traction and recognized that what our families were experiencing were cancers as a result of exposures to toxins. Well, that brought with it an entire population of surviving family members who had been caregivers. That's where Steve's and my work really intersects. You know, for our families, and I'll tell you about little Cambridge Brown. He was 3 years old when his dad, who was a just really intense Navy search and rescue guy. I mean, his dad was, you know, just a tough guy who saved lives. When he was diagnosed with cancer and began that battle, it was devastating for his family. His mom was also active duty Navy, so she had to keep doing her job, and it fell to Cambridge to kind of be dad's buddy, going to therapy with him, just helping him do the most basic things. So from age 3 to age 7, Cambridge, instead of being that little boy, was a caregiver to his father. He never really got to play football with his dad like normal kids do. And then when his dad died, his family had to redefine who they were now. It's a very different journey. So TAPS has done a tremendous amount of work last year. You know, a lot of people think it's a small population, but we had 9,560 newly bereaved families who came to us for support. 1/3 of those were grieving a loss to illness. So that means 1/3 of those, a little over 3,000, had been living that caregiver journey. So when the death occurred, who are they now without their responsibility? And then we find they also are grieving the person they knew, that person before they became ill. It's a very, very complicated journey. We see this with suicide loss as well. Very complicated. And TAPS now has a military caregiver to survivor program. We incubated the Military Veteran Caregiver Network of peer-based emotional support. We partner with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, and it's become this community, this beautiful, loving transition from one experience to the other.
Excellent. Questions are already coming in, but please post yours here on the stream. And I have one, because you mentioned, Mattie, that you serve. And so you work with people across the board. And there's an assumption, I think, that, oh, well, you're in the military, you understand all that. You know what I mean? Like, it's easier to be a person who's helping someone who is struggling with PTSD, or it's easy to help someone who's lost someone if you serve. So did your military service help you? And then how much, for the three of you, does it have an impact, or are these people just as lost as dopes like me?
Well, yes to both.
Okay.
And it does help to speak the language, to be part of the community, to be part of the tribe at many different levels. I found some of my strongest support was from my fellow airmen who stepped in to really be there for me in a very different way than I think others could, who I worked with. But grief, as I said, is incredibly misunderstood.
What about for you, Steve? Working with people who have veterans in their lives or active lives, does that make a difference?
I'm really glad you asked this question. Only about 40% of America's veterans are inside the VA system. It means there's a lot of folks who are navigating healthcare systems that aren't as adept in military and veteran culture. One of our biggest efforts is to train clinicians on those nuances so that they understand what PTSD means, what a traumatic brain injury is, when there may be a condition a cancer or respiratory condition that's related to service, and then ensuring that we create inclusive care environments, both inside those military and veteran healthcare ecosystems and across every healthcare system across the country. In fact, that's one of our biggest priorities this year, is to take what we've done at VA, where we've trained 15,000 clinicians, and ensure we're doing it so that they don't miss that cultural link and that cultural language that's so important to recovery.
And where's this training happening? What communities, what states, where is it?
Well, it's actually happening all over the country.
Can we some examples?
Yeah, we will. The New Haven VA in Connecticut, where there is a number of specialists around respiratory conditions that veterans face. And there's one particular group of physicians who have become champions for the work that we're doing. And it's been noticed, caregivers who are coming in and saying, I'm not left outside the treatment room anymore. I'm brought in so that when my veteran says, I'm having a great day, they can say, wait a second, Joe, just last week, it's that you're familiar with this, right? By the way, their disability ratings and those check-ins sometimes mean higher levels of benefits or lower level of benefits. So ensuring that spouse or that sibling or that parent is in the room when that evaluation is happening is something New Haven's doing now culturally.
So, doctors are their own worst patients, Hannah, and waiters are your worst customers if you're a waiter. Are veteran spouses your worst nightmare, or are they your best friends?
They're your best friends.
Oh, okay.
They're your best friends. No, I think they're your best friends.
In other words, spouses who've served or are serving themselves.
I think as Bonnie was saying, there's a translation, an understanding of the culture and the language that's critical. I think what I want to draw attention to is a subpopulation of spouses, which we call the post-service spouse, which is a marriage after service. That's me. My husband had left service when I met him and married him. A recent RAND report showed that we're the majority of veteran spouses.
Interesting.
And I think there's often an assumption that the military spouse, the veteran spouse, was with their partner while they were active duty. Most of us were not. And so there's that disconnect, understanding the culture, the systems, what all those conditions are, the experiences that they had. And so that's what we find a lot of our work is bringing active duty spouses or those who are now veteran spouses but were with their partner when they served with our post-service spouses so they can support each other, learn from each other. I certainly have immense amounts of knowledge that I didn't have had I not worked in this space, connected to this community. That just would have causes a lot of disconnect in relationships.
So I want to get to these questions are pouring in, so I get to them. One of them is, you've spoken about the struggles for military families. Are there policy changes or legislation that would help you in your cause?
Yeah, I'll say the largest piece of veterans legislation that was passed in the last Congress was named for Elizabeth Dole. It was a 4-year effort to transform the way that the VA offers care clinically to ensure that we're prioritizing care in the home. I will tell you that it's one thing to pass legislation. The next set of efforts is to make sure that that gets implemented.
Right.
Because agencies, Bonnie knows this because she was a big partner. We couldn't have done this without TAPS. Agencies drag their feet on implementation. And it's really important that we have advocates in the media and at the community level to hold Congress and the administration accountable for ensuring that these life-changing supports that are necessary get implemented.
Yeah, and there are also state benefits for
right.
surviving families.
Oh, okay.
Everything from waivers of education tuition at state universities, for our family's Gold Star license plate, property tax waivers, and we found that 54 states and 4 territories were doing it all differently, different eligibilities. So over the past 10 years, we've had a Gold Star compact to make sure that it's a little more equal.
Hannah, I want to start with this question for you. How well are we supporting veterans when it comes to housing, VA loan programs, et cetera, for mortgages? And obviously right now, housing is tough for everybody. It's a tough market. What is it like for the people you're helping?
It's definitely a challenge. I know in our wellness study, it definitely wasn't a top challenge that was noted. I think actually our environmental wellness was noted as maybe the highest overall wellness. I mean, the programs work pretty well. We used the VA home loan ourselves a few years ago. I think it's more we're seeing like financial wellness be where folks are struggling right now for a lot of different reasons, which can obviously then translate into that. But I think there are a lot of good programs and supports in place. And so a lot of what we try to do is through different seminars and podcast things is introduce, our network to those organizations who can help them navigate it.
I want to comment on this because we've seen something a little different.
No, perfect.
We didn't see housing on the top of the list until recently, and it's now number 1 or 2 in terms of cost of living, in terms of access to benefits that veterans and families deserve. Benefits are out there. What we're finding is families don't know where they are and how to sign up. So we have a resource navigation team that does just that, sort of connecting the dots for families, and we all, I think, do that really well. So folks need to make sure they're not just aware of these benefits, but they're taking advantage of them as well.
You mentioned systemic versus systematic, which is a complicated way for saying big picture problems versus individual problems. Is it the case that as a nation we have a drive to help these families, that if you stand up and say, I'm a spouse of a veteran, or I'm a child of a veteran, we need some help, and that it's just pragmatically we're dropping the ball? Would that be how you describe it?
I think that's a great question. I think it's more than pragmatism. We have a philosophical commitment to this community. It's driven by our patriotism. It's driven by our history, our sense of service. But these problems are so complex, and I'm sorry, but our healthcare system is a mess. And we have the CEO of Humana on our board, and he would be the first to admit the healthcare system is a complex mess. And so dealing with referrals across mental and emotional and physical and transitioning folks from caregiving to surviving and ensuring they're getting their benefits, it takes all of us to ensure that there's a systemic approach to that, but it's still not working.
So I hate jargon, and every time you guys say peer-to-peer, I want to throw my microphone at you, because no human beings say peer-to-peer. This is friends talking, I think. Is that the right translation? Can you give me an example from where one of those conversations or where a relationship seemed to make a difference for someone that you were serving through your group?
Absolutely. And, it's especially true for kids. Our military surviving children are bullied. They're isolated. They're going to school after taking care maybe as a caregiver, and then now grieving a dad when every other kid has a dad to play football with them or come to their games. So to be in an environment where they can run up to another child. We literally the other day at one of our camps had a little kid come running in, had their photo album, and came up to the first kid just about their height and said, "Is your dad dead?" And this other kid just went, "Uh-huh." And they said, "Here's my dad," and showed pictures, and they said, "And we wear photo buttons, here's my dad." And they became, they'll be lifelong best friends. They had everything in common. Right. And they said, "I'm gonna have your back. If you have trouble at school, let's connect." Their mom's connected. They're creating this network of others who get it, who understand, who are walking this same really difficult journey together.
Hannah, do you have a spouse-to-spouse conversation?
Yeah, I mean, Bonnie nailed it. And what we see in our groups, when I know it's working, is when you see the shaken head. Someone's talking, and whether it's a real room like us or a virtual room, and you just see these people doing this over and over again, and then come on and say, that's me. That's where I am, or that's where I was, or what have you. I get it when I share my story and people say, okay, I was there, I'm there where you were. How do I get here? Right. And it's all about that cutting across that shared experience is just beyond powerful.
Well, I just want to add, grief is not a mental illness.
Right.
We want to make it clinical. We want to, have people say, well, you should see someone, but it's the normal human response to loss. And the only thing that helps is being with someone else who can kind of just say, yeah, I get it.
So you mentioned the study that you had, and once again, in very jargony terms, so I'm going to try to give, how are our spouses and children and partners of veterans doing generally, would you say?
Generally, our study was just spouses, so no children. So we did the 5 dimensions of wellness, 8 dimensions of wellness, so I can read them off, but what we saw.
When you say environmental wellness, I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, like the environment around you. So, how you feel in your surroundings, how you feel in your neighborhood, safety in your neighborhood, and what you can access in your environment. That was high. Spiritual wellness was high. A lot of that was as you can imagine from our population, like sense of purpose. But what we saw low was emotional, which is mental health. So one of our reporters asked, can you talk about military family suicide? Yeah, absolutely.
And the question I have is, we know about the tragedy of veterans who take their lives, but is there a similar trend, a fall behind trend from their families and caregivers?
Wouldn't we all like to know? Is the answer. It's collected from DOD. So we do have data on that from DOD. That shows that, yes, it is a problem for military spouses as well. There is no one collecting that data for veteran spouses. So we don't know.
Okay.
And that's a problem.
Someone should gather that data, Steve.
Hannah said it right. It's not systemically being accounted for. Anecdotally, we collect data on our communities. We're seeing very concerning levels of suicide ideation and suicide among caregivers, spouses, siblings. We have a national initiative called Face the Fight. It was founded by USAA, Reach Resilience, and the Humana Foundation. It's raised $85 million to invest in best-in-class organizations who are doing frontline suicide prevention work. We have 250 organizations across the country who are on the front lines doing this work, coordinating in ways. And we're now moving beyond veteran and service member suicide, talking about spouses and caregivers and what we need to do to ensure that these statistics are both counted, but also we're being accountable for making sure we do preventative work.
And we have 31,000 surviving family members right now within TAPS who've lost a loved one to suicide in the military or veteran community. So we are just now launching a new survey of the risk factors that they saw. We know this anecdotally, and it's things that really we're not addressing. It is sleep deprivation, undiagnosed traumatic brain injury, chronic pain. So these are things that now with this research, we hopefully can inform best practices and prevention efforts.
Well, Ray Futrell is looking down on me. He will not let me let this end on a down note because he was always proud of his military service, always. I have his ribbons, and so he recorded one of those things. They had the record albums in Europe that you could record. It's just scratch. You can barely hear his voice. Just so wonderful. So I want you to talk about the people that you've helped who went on to do something after you helped them. I mean, I think, for example, look, everyone's down on politics right now, but in Congress is full of people who have served or are the spouses of people who serve. You look at business leaders, men and women across the country. They're people, military service is an empowering thing that comes with challenges. So can you tell us about some people you've helped and what they went on to do?
Well,
sure, go ahead.
Yeah, well, Nathaniel Lee just did a webinar for us last week, and he lost his dad in a military helicopter crash when he was just 8 years old, and his little brother was 6. And his mom pretty quickly moved away to a non-military community. They really struggled. It wasn't until he came to the Good Grief Camp that he found his community, and he grew up in the TAPS Good Grief Camp, became a legacy mentor, went on to college, then joined the Air Force. He's now a major in the United States Space Force. He's got a wife, 2 kids, doing incredible work. But he did this webinar talking to other parents, other surviving moms, about what it was like as a little boy to grow up. And just the feedback was incredible. So what are kids now going through 30 years of TAPS existence, growing up with this family, and how they have been able to become strong, successful adults. I'm just So proud of all of them.
See?
I'm going to mention Roxana Delgado, who was one of our earliest Dole Caregiver Fellows. She's from San Antonio, Texas, Military City, USAA. She was caring for her husband, Victor, who was suffering in many dimensions by virtue of his service. She's now Dr. Roxana Delgado. A prime example of what we try to do in our Dole Caregiver Fellows program, which is put these individuals on a path to empowerment. She leads a center that is a groundbreaking center for caregiver support at UT San Antonio and is really a pioneer in helping both measure and advocate for programs that are effective in supporting spouses and other members of the family. And she is a shining example of what this word resilience is thrown around a lot. Roxana, Dr. Delgado, is a living, breathing person who is resilient.
Hannah?
I'll do my in-house one as staff member. I'm very proud of. A lot of our participants become peer leaders afterwards, and 2 of our participants, then peer leaders, then became staff. And so I'll toot Ashley Craig's horn. She's a veteran spouse. She came in, just as everyone does, struggling, looking for support, then became a peer leader for several years, then became an intern with us, then came and did our marketing. And then she said, I'm really passionate about suicide prevention. And we were a part of Face the Fight, and we got that grant. She said, I'd really like to build this program for us. And so she built and leads our suicide prevention program, where we're training thousands of folks a year. So I'm really proud of her.
That's great. These stories are absolutely great, and this is the reason why Inside Sources hosts virtual editorial boards like this. You will see lots of Inside Sources content about these and other stories coming up, particularly in May, which is Military Spouse Month. And then May 8th is Military Spouse Day. I think I got that right.
Also Military Caregiver Month.
That's it. Military Caregiver Month, Military Spouse Day. May 8th, my mom's birthday, Ray's daughter. So that's kind of cool. And for those of you who are watching and participating, we hope that you also do your own reporting and draw these resources. If you have follow-up questions from any of these groups, Inside Sources will happily connect you. If you have any follow-up questions about this event, we'll happily get you the data, whatever you need. We just want to spread the word about the terrific work you're doing. Thanks again to PMI US for making this possible. With Inside Sources, I am Michael Graham.